and welcome to the Dynamic Duel Podcast, a weekly show where we review superhero films and debate the superiority between Marvel and DC by comparing their characters in stat-based battle simulations. I'm Marvelous Joe.
And I'm his twin brother, Johnny DC.
And in this episode, the episode that nobody asked for, we will be reviewing Runaways Season 2.
And we're reviewing it because we are men bound by rules, and we adhere to our code because that's what superheroes taught us to do.
Right, we are honor-bound to review this show because it was released all at once on a streaming platform, and that's what we said. It's something that you could binge in a weekend, so we're reviewing it. But we're going to learn a lot. We're going to talk about all the differences between the show and the comics, and, you know, it'll be fun. Honestly, it was hard to review because I'm not passionate about it in either sense. Like, I don't love it, I don't hate it, I'm entirely neutral on it, and that's probably because we're not part of the target demographic, honestly.
Right.
But yeah, we'll get more into that later on this episode. Before that, we're going to get into the comic book movie news that happened over the past week. Not much news, basically just a promo video for the upcoming Punisher season on Netflix, which we will be reviewing in a couple of weeks, actually.
Right, yeah.
So yeah, look forward to that.
And feel free to jump around. We list the time codes for each segment in our episode description.
We want to give a quick shout out to Joshy God, Lisa Nitz, and Mitchie P. Diddy for leaving us reviews on iTunes. Actually, Mitchie P. Diddy gave us 10 out of 5 stars, so I hope iTunes counts that twice. But thank you guys so much. We really appreciate it. We're looking to get to 200 ratings on iTunes. Right now, we're at 64, but once we hit 200, we're eligible to become critics on the Rotten Tomatoes platform, at which point our reviews of the Marvel and DC movies will count toward their official tomato meters.
Hopefully,
So,
yeah, once they approve us.
Yeah, that would be awesome. So definitely, if you have an iPhone and you're listening to us on Apple Podcasts, go ahead and hit pause and then hit rate 5 stars or whatever you want to give us, and then hit submit, and then go ahead and continue listening to the episode. And actually, honestly, full disclosure, I don't even listen to this podcast on Apple Podcasts. I actually prefer like Radio Public, but I do have an old iTunes account that I use, and that's what I use to rate our own show. Yes, I rated our own show.
How dare you? Yeah, so thanks again. We've come a long way since we started asking for reviews, and since we started trying to hit the 200 mark. And with that out of the way,
quick to the No Prize.
So No Prize is an award that Marvel used to give out up until the 90s to fans. Our version, the Dynamic Duel No Prize, is a digital award that we post to social media that I personally draw for those who we feel gave the best answer to our question of the week.
And last week's question was, what do you think Jude Law's Marvel character's story is going to be? Is he going to be good or bad?
It was kind of a vague question.
It wasn't a great question, but I'm glad a lot of people came through with answers. We've actually since learned, since we asked this question, that merch art was actually incorrect. He is officially going to be playing Yon-Rogg and not Marvel.
What?
They keep dicking us around.
What? I didn't hear that.
Yeah, you didn't see the back of the toy?
No.
Yeah, it says Yon-Rogg.
Oh my gosh. What is going on?
So, yeah, this whole question is kind of a moot point because he's not playing Marvel. He is playing Yon-Rogg, who is a villainous character from the comics.
He's playing both, apparently.
I guess. I don't know what's going to happen. But let's go ahead and see what you guys answered. Honorable mention goes to Joel Seagrave, who said, I think he'll be good. Also like Kilowog, where he's harsh and drills Danvers on how to use powers, but ultimately earns his respect. Kind of like the Green Lantern film, but actually good.
Whatever, dude. No, it's fine. We reviewed it. We know what it's like.
Honorable mention also goes to Adam Spees, who said that he thinks Marvel will be good. He'll be a leader, mentor type that Carol Danvers looks up to, maybe even likes, but nothing romantic. And when he dies, she'll take his Marvel title. I think that's what I was expecting before the whole Yon-Rogg
That's
thing.
Sort of what I'm hoping for.
Really?
I guess apparently my dreams have been dashed.
Yep, they already have. Honorable mention also goes to Ken Johnson, who said that he thinks Marvel will be good, but in the Louis Gossett Jr. officer and the gentleman kind of way, which is a reference that completely went over my head.
I'd never seen that movie.
Because I've never seen that film. But it was probably brilliant, and I respect you, Ken Johnson. The winner of this week's No Prize winners, I should say, are CJ Kraft and Colby Henchies, who both basically gave the answer that he'll be a good guy who, in a twist, turns out to be bad at the end. Like, all of a sudden, it turns out he actually really hates humans. And I actually do think that would be interesting to see. I mean, if that does happen, we just spoiled it for ourselves. But we already know it's not going to happen because Yon-Rogg is bad. And he probably will end up hating humans because we know that the Earth is like caught in between the Kree-Skrull War. And I'm just guessing that Yon-Rogg is going to be a character who doesn't care about Earth's collateral damage, basically. Mm-hmm. So yeah, good job again to CJ Kraft and Colby Henchies for those winning answers. You guys win the No Prize for this week. And if you, the listener, want to win a No Prize, go ahead and stay tuned to later on this episode when we will be asking another question of the week. And now that we're done with that,
on to the news.
So season 2 of The Punisher on Netflix is going to come out in just a few weeks, actually. January 18th is its official release date, as revealed by this latest promo that Netflix put out. And, it's not so much a trailer or a teaser like we've had with the other shows.
Right, there's no footage.
Right, there's no footage from the actual show in it. It's basically the camera spinning around both Jigsaw and Punisher, and they're just kind of like playing up the duality and the similarities between the two characters.
They're like finishing each other's sentences.
Yeah, it's kind of done in a really cool way. It's pretty hardcore, and I really like the music that they use here. As you guys know, if you listen to our review of Punisher Season 1, we are huge fans of that show. We think that they did a really damn good job with the character of Frank Castle.
It's definitely the best version of the Punisher that we've seen in live action.
Right, yeah, and that includes the Punisher Warzone movie, and the Punisher movie with Thomas Jane, and the 89 Punisher movie with Dolph Lundgren. So I'm really excited to see what they have in store for us with this next season, because this promo gives nothing away plot-wise. I have no idea, honestly, what to expect from the upcoming season.
Other than Jigsaw is really pissed off,
yeah,
and he has some cat scratches on his face.
Yeah, I remember when we first discussed the photos, they were like leaked photos that were released on Just Jared that showed what Billy Russo's face was going to look like now that he came back out of the hospital from season 1.
Right.
And we were super disappointed at that point because he's still better looking than like most guys out there, despite the fact he has like all these scratches on his face.
Exactly.
He doesn't look nearly bad enough is what we were saying. And I'm not sure why they decided to do that with a character, and it's possible that his face will get progressively more fucked up through the course of this season, and then hopefully they retire him as a villain for the Punisher show and they choose someone else for season 3.
Well, I'm sure they're gonna retire the Punisher show, period.
If there is a season 3 is what I was gonna say. So.
Okay.
But yeah, I would like to see his face get more messed up, but I guess in the interim, Jigsaw is wearing a mask during the course of this show.
I didn't hate the mask.
The mask looks pretty interesting.
It's kind of creepy.
It's creepy in a way that I don't hate. I mean, I shouldn't like the idea of Jigsaw wearing a mask, but the design of this thing holds up pretty damn well in my mind.
It reminds me of like the cover of, what is it called? Like Dead Presidents or something like that. The movie. I've never seen the movie. I just know the cover.
Yeah, with the white makeup face.
Yeah.
This is a little bit more scarred up and haunting. Definitely gets the Jigsaw name across for sure because it looks all puzzled together.
Right.
And they even talk about like putting pieces of a puzzle together in the promo, which is, a little bit of foreshadowing. I don't know if they'll actually call Billy Russo Jigsaw during the course of this show, but we'll see what happens.
It does make sense, I think, for Jigsaw to wear a mask if he's so vain. Why would he want to show the world his scarred up face? So I think that's a good justification for the mask.
Actually not a bad point. I mean, it's not faithful to the comics, but that is a valid point. And it's definitely an interesting adaptation from the source material.
And it's like, why not? Why isn't that a thing in the comics,
Because
it would
then
make sense.
Then he would be Black Mask from the Batman comics.
I guess. Yeah, I guess that's true.
This promo got me excited for the upcoming season. I actually like the fact that it wasn't like a regular trailer. I like the fact that we haven't seen really any footage from the upcoming season.
I don't think that's good at all. To me, this is just Netflix dropping the ball on the marketing for another Marvel show.
Well,
I mean, do you remember how good and how powerful the first trailer we got for season 1 was of The Punisher? It was like,
that's right, with the Metallica song.
Yeah.
Oh, fuck, that was great.
This is nothing compared to that.
That's true. That's very true. Yeah, they are dropping the ball, and we know why. We talked about that when they announced the cancellation of Daredevil and Luke Cage and Iron Fist. It's because Netflix is pissed at Disney that Disney is coming out with their own streaming app to compete with Netflix later on this year. So they're canceling all the Marvel properties. I mean, that's the rumor, but it seems highly likely.
To me, this is still just like Netflix just being pissy, It's kind of, I mean, like as a DC fan, someone who's not like really a Marvel fan, like this is kind of amusing to watch.
Well, fuck you.
It's like, I mean, not that Netflix is any kind of match for Disney, but like it's kind of cool to see like the little guy take on the big guy.
Well, I don't think Disney will be too affected by this. I mean, eventually they're going to have plans for these characters. And that brings us to our question of the week. What do you think Disney will do with the Netflix characters of The Punisher, Daredevil, Jessica Jones, Iron Fist, and Luke Cage? Will their next appearances be in TV or in film? And do you think they will be rebooted?
Right, because like I guess they were technically a part of the MCU, but like it's not like any of the movies ever mentioned them. So
right.
If they wanted to reboot them and just say, no, they were never part of the MCU, like they could do that.
They could. They were largely removed from the cinematic universe. You're right. So go ahead and post your answer to our Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, or email us at dynamicduelpodcast@gmail.com. We'll pick our favorite answer and draw that person a Dynamic Duel No Prize that we'll post to social media. And you can find access to all of our social media accounts by visiting dynamicduel.com. We'd love to hear your answer, so go ahead and check it out. But that does it for all the news. Again, it's just a short news week. Not much coming out these days, but I think we're supposed to get a Shazam trailer pretty soon, so we'll be talking about that in the next episode or two.
Yeah, hopefully.
With that all out of the way, let's go ahead and get into our review of Runaways Season 2. Okay, Runaways Season 2, we are actually doing this. So I'm not sure how many people are actually familiar with the source material of the Runaways, because I never really got a feel that they were the most popular of comics.
Right.
But it was a pretty damn good story, which is why I could see that it was proposed to be made into a movie for a really long time and why it eventually became a TV show, because the concept is solid. I do think that this television series, both Season 1 and Season 2, have kind of dropped the ball on the concept of the comic book series.
Really?
Yeah, and I'll go ahead and basically give an overview of what the comics were about so you have some context.
Okay, cool. Because honestly, the storyline may have received like critical acclaim from the comics, but the characters for me just, they're not big names. And I'm definitely curious to see like how many people like even listen to this episode.
Right, exactly. Actually, if you are listening to this episode and you haven't seen the Runaways show, I'm not even going to bother to recommend that you do watch it before we get into this, just because I don't think that it's a show that I recommend watching to begin with. But the comic book series I would recommend. It's written by Brian K. Vaughan, who I absolutely love. He's one of my favorite comic book writers of all time. I loved Why the Last Man, and that's how I got into the Runaways, actually, was through that series, because I just was a huge fan of his writing.
Yeah, that's one of my favorites. Oh, you like a DC comic there.
Why the Last Man is not DC.
Oh, it's Vertigo.
Yeah, I mean, it's not DC, so.
Okay. It was a really good comic, though.
It was great. So in the Runaways comic series, before time, there were these elder gods that ruled over the earth called the Gibberim. And through time, as humanity rose, their power kind of fell. But they were unhappy with how humanity had progressed, so they had decided that they were going to destroy the earth. But they needed enough power to do so. So what they did is they chose 6 couples and asked them to perform ritual sacrifices every year. And they would use the power of the sacrifice to empower themselves to eventually destroy the world after 25 years. So it would take 25 years of sacrifices for them to have enough power to destroy the world. And at that point, the Gibberim promised to bestow 6 people among the 6 couples, so just half the group, with eternal life. So these 6 couples were known as the Pride. So every year they would sacrifice a young woman to the gods as part of their deal. And in exchange, they got wealth and power and influence. And they became supervillains, basically.
But did that only happen like 25 years ago prior to the story? Because if they've been around since the beginning of time...
The Gibberim have been around since the beginning of time, but the couples are modern.
Okay.
So they've been villains for about 20 years or so now when the story starts. Basically, one of the couples of the Pride got pregnant, and so they decided to all get pregnant and all have one kid that they would bestow one of the 6 spots on of eternal life. Basically, they were giving up their lives for their children so that their children could live on in whatever world comes after this world, after the Gibberim destroy it, basically. Is how the story goes.
Okay, already, this is way more interesting than the actual show.
It is. It is a great story. The kids stumble upon their parents performing one of these annual ritual sacrifices, and so they immediately go on the run. And as they investigate their parents, they come across these like weapons that they could use, and they develop superpowers that they didn't know they had and things like that. And they use that to try to defeat their parents and save the world, basically.
And this all happened in Season 1 of The Runaways? Because I didn't see Season 1.
No, this was the comic book series.
Right.
Season 1 very loosely adapts that storyline. They don't actually become runaways until the last episode of Season 1, and they walk in on their parents performing the sacrifice on the first episode. So that was a 10-episode season, and throughout that entire time, they're just kind of like deciding what to do, and their parents are like, oh, did they see us or did they not? And it's just a bunch of bullshit. I hated Season 1. Season 2 is actually better than Season 1, but in the end, I think the show takes so many departures from the source material that it's hard for me to know how to review it, because it doesn't feel the same. It's barely a superhero show and largely disconnected from everything else Marvel, like the cinematic universe and stuff. So it doesn't really feel like a Marvel show. It feels largely irrelevant.
I definitely felt that when I was watching this.
Yeah.
That like it didn't feel like Marvel. It just felt like, I don't know, some like bullshit show you would see like on ABC Friday nights, you
Yeah,
know?
kind of.
It felt so low budget, just not well made.
I mean, I think it was made okay. I think it's the story that gets me the most. Like, if you're a fan of the comic book story from Brian K. Vaughan, then the show is comparatively, I think, boring and lacking in superhero action, and I wouldn't recommend it if you haven't seen it. But if you're new to the material, and I know some people who have actually seen this show and liked it, and they never read the comics, I assume that this show is like a decent, fresh-feeling teenage drama, and maybe I would recommend it, you know, if you're in the target demographic. For me personally, the show's biggest fault was that in the adaptation of the source material, they changed genres somewhere along the way, because I would classify the comics as action first and teenage drama second. This show is definitely teenage drama first and action second. So it does little for me. But if I were really into Marvel and shows like Pretty Little Liars or The OC or something like that, I think The Runaways would actually be pretty decent. You and I definitely fall outside the center of the Venn diagram that is the target audience of this show, where we are fans of superhero drama, but not teen drama.
Right.
So it's kind of hard to objectively rate the quality of something you don't care about.
Well, and I mean, especially for me, because
Yeah.
I'm not a Marvel fan. So to me,
you're
this
completely
was
out
pure
there, Ben.
fucking torture. I hated watching this show, especially because I didn't see season 1. Like, I'm really, really wishing, like, one day DC is just going to release, like, a really shitty show all at once, so you could be forced to endure what I have endured. The things I sacrifice for this podcast.
So yeah, basically, it's hard to be passionate about this show. And yet, big yet, I can objectively say that Cloak and Dagger, which is another Marvel teen drama on the Freeform channel, that is a superior show to this, despite the fact that I'm largely outside that demographic as well.
Yeah, I know you've said that you liked that show. A lot of people have said that was a good show.
It was a fantastic show. So although I'm sure I'm not entirely objective here, I at least have a means of comparison, and I could use that to determine the final rating that we give this.
Right.
Cloak and Dagger is just a better show with more approachable themes and a more interesting story that actually, you know, go somewhere. Runaways is different from the other Marvel television series, such as, you know, the Netflix shows and Cloak and Dagger and Legion.
Oh, yeah.
In that there's not really an overarching narrative throughout the seasons. I mean, there is the primary goal for the Runaways, which is the defeat of their villainous parents, but it's a goal where completion doesn't necessarily matter, and it, in fact, is essential for the show. If they defeated their parents, they would no longer be Runaways and the show would be over. And so the villains must continue and the kids must keep running. And during both the first and second seasons of this show, they are no closer to achieving their primary goal than when they started, with the Wilder family at the end here being a minor exception.
Right.
But that's not going to stick. So while the constant lack of resolution makes for a pretty compelling comic book series, which, you know, at least contains a lot more adrenaline and suspense, this show feels mostly pointless to me, where the side stories don't matter and the main story lacks closure.
There are so many side stories. Way too many side stories.
Right.
This could have been like a 5-episode season, in my opinion.
I think Runaways would actually make a great, fantastic movie. A movie that would be fast-paced, a movie that would be so damn suspenseful. Something like Enemy of the State level of suspense is what I'm thinking of. With Will Smith. You ever see that movie?
Yeah.
That was a damn good thriller. It could be like that, but instead, we have this slow-ass paced teen drama. And that kind of sucks. In the comics, the teens were always only like a half step ahead of the parents. And they barely had any time to breathe. You know, they'd be like getting an artifact or something, turn around, and all of a sudden their parents were there. And they'd be like, oh shit, we gotta run. You know, and in this, they get so much time to breathe and just chill.
Yeah.
It's kind of lame. But let's talk about the characters. Let's get into the character breakdown. Let's start with Alex Wilder, the leader of the Runaways, played by Renzi Felice. He's actually my favorite character of the show. He's probably the best actor, I think. I never really get annoyed when he's on the screen. And a lot of his stuff actually advances the plot of the show forward.
Now, I know the twist. You've mentioned the twist with his character from the comics.
Yes.
I never got the sense that they were even trying to attempt to go in that direction with this show.
No, they made a lot of changes to these characters. Like in this show, there was no mole for the parents. Because like in the comics, one of the kids was a mole for the Pride within the Runaways group and was secretly still loyal to the parents.
Now, they mentioned a mole in the very first episode, but that didn't go anywhere.
That was like, it was more of a Easter egg than anything else. But I will say that specifically Alex is probably the most faithful to the comics in terms of, you know, his brilliance and, you know, his reasoning abilities and his attitude and things like that. I actually like the character. I would actually prefer this show if it was just the Alex Wilder show. I think that would be a lot more compelling to me. I don't need the other characters, really.
He is the most compelling character, I think, out of the whole group, for sure.
And he was the only one that was really kind of successful at the end of this season in at least making some progress towards making their parents come to justice.
It's true. Everyone else just had their head up their asses, and he's like, I'm doing this job.
Right.
I'm going to get it done.
Exactly. Let's move on to Nico Minoru, played by Lyrica Okano. I think she is a fantastic actress. While Alex is probably the most faithful to the comic book character, I actually think that Nico is superior to her comic book character.
Oh, really?
Who I kind of found kind of bland. The actress Lyrica actually brings a lot to this role and brings a lot of character depth just in the way that she acts. She brings a lot of nuance to it. And, she had some interesting turns here where it turns out that she's, a very vengeful person and she struggles with the darkness of her powers and stuff like that, which they got into later on in the comics, but not in the same way that they did here. It's interesting.
She's definitely the coolest character, I think. I actually really liked her character. She's probably my favorite out of the group.
Yeah. She's definitely the most heavily marketed, I would say.
Well,
I think
true.
just because she has
that's
a
true.
cool look.
Yeah.
She's like an Asian goth kid with this magic staff. Although I don't know if the staff is magic in the show or not, because it was created by her parents who are like technological entrepreneurs, and in the first season appeared very technological, and it didn't make any sense how it was able to do the things it was able to do. But in this season, it was a lot more magical, and it actually looked like she was pulling the energy to create her spells from the dark dimension.
Right.
Because the flesh around her eyes would actually kind of crackle and peel away, kind of like how Caecilius's did in the Doctor Strange movie.
Yeah, that's true.
Which I thought was actually a really fascinating take on her powers. Possibly an interesting tie into the MCU.
And that was probably intentional. You'd have to think it was.
Yeah, probably. They're probably looking for, more and better ways to tie these television shows into the MCU so that they feel more relevant to viewers.
So you said the staff was more technological in the comics?
No, in the show it's more technological. In the comics, it's pure magic. Like her parents are sorcerers, and the staff of one actually, it goes into her body. She houses the staff within her soul, and it only comes out when she draws blood from herself. So she has to cut herself for the staff to come out of her, and then she's able to use it.
Oh, geez.
Yeah, it's kind of dark.
I could see why they didn't do that in the show.
Yeah, you don't want to show a character cutting themselves in the show.
In a teen show.
Yeah, for sure. Let's move on to Carolina Dean, who was played by Virginia Gardner. I have the least amount of notes for this character because to me, she's just largely meh. The special effect that they used to create Carolina's glowing alien skin is not too impressive to me. I imagined it a lot better in my head.
It's definitely not like Dr. Manhattan from Watchmen.
Right.
The glow that emits from her doesn't radiate off of other surfaces around her.
Yeah, and it's largely flat too.
Yeah.
In the comics, they described it as like a glowing watercolor painting that's always moving and very beautiful and things like that. And while I do think that Carolina could be considered, beautiful in her alien form, the special effects look so cheesy that it's hard for me to get around that. And I don't think she uses her powers enough during the course of this show. And, in the comics, she's using them all the time. She's flying everywhere she goes, And in this, it's like, they have a budget to stick to. So, you're lucky to see her go into her alien form once an episode.
Right. It's like, why do they even have a car? She could just, fly them all places.
That's true, because she can create constructs to wrap around and carry her teammates.
Well, she did that with Alex, when they were scoring off with AWOL at their mansion hideaway.
Right, yeah, and she also carried down Chase and Molly and Nico down into the hole, into the drill site. Yeah,
that's right.
Using those things. But, she never used them really offensively or anything like that.
Is she really an alien in the comics?
Yes. Except in the comics, for the longest time, she was really ashamed about being an alien. She wanted everybody to think that she was a mutant. So
really?
Yeah,
wow.
They never went down that road here. Here, she's a lot more accepting of who she is and what she is.
In the comics, isn't her name Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds or something like that?
Yeah. They've all had different names over their run in the comics. They can never really decide which one they want to stick with. Because I remember Bruiser, Molly, she was called Bruiser at first, and then she wanted to be called Princess Powerful. It was weird. But kind of charming. They don't really have a set superhero name, which is kind of the appeal.
But why would Carolina want to be called Lucy?
Well, in the comics, she wanted to be called Lucy in the Sky because she was just a big fan of the Beatles. She had a greatest hits album from her dad.
Okay.
So I don't know.
All right. Okay.
Let's move on to Gert Yorks, who is probably my second least favorite character in the Runaways. She's the one who can control the Deinonychus. In this, she's just so damn annoying. And she never advances the plot. She's, berating other people, being super sarcastic, or when she needs her meds or something like that.
Right. I would say she was my least favorite character, just in that she didn't do anything with her dinosaur. Like, she never went into battle with it or anything like that.
She hasn't done anything with her dinosaur in the course of this entire show, even in season 1.
So why is she even on the team?
I want to see some dinosaur chomp down on some fucking bad guys.
Exactly.
That's what I want to see.
Like, I sort of felt like the show hit a climax in episode 7.
Yeah.
And then, like, when the show kept going, I was like, okay, you know, they were just waiting to use the dinosaur for, like, the real final battle. And then never fucking came.
Sucker.
I know.
And, you know, like, what was Gert's arc in this? Like, during the first half of the season, her arc was, oh, I need my meds. Then the second half of the season, her arc was like, oh, I'm sick.
You would almost think, like, you know, she's dependent on these meds. So maybe her arc was going to be like, well, she's going to grow to live without her meds and just, you know, cope as a person without them.
Yeah. But
And maybe that's not necessarily a fair sort of arc because there are quite a few people who are dependent on medication.
Yeah, and it seemed like she had the type of illness that would warrant regular medication.
Right. But then, like, yeah, you're right. What was her arc then? She had none.
I mean, she's kind of like a bit of a weirdo in the comics too, but like in an endearing kind of way, I think. Here, they don't quite necessarily nail that endearing quality. Mm-hmm. And maybe she's just not weird enough in this group, in a group where everybody's kind of weird.
Well, yeah, I mean, she's like dating the jock. I mean, how weird can she be?
Well, I mean, that's from the comics, so, you know.
Opposites attract?
Yeah, exactly. Speaking of that, let's move on to Chase Stein. I like the actor who plays him, but the character I absolutely cannot stand. The character is such a huge hypocrite. You know, like, he never does ever what's best for the team. Like, I think he almost has, like, too much sympathy for his parents. Like, it happened in season 1, because during the course of season 1, they actually had video evidence that their parents were performing these rituals. Mm-hmm. They had video evidence. And what does Chase do? He smashes the laptop because he didn't want his dad to go to jail because his dad was sick. You know,
jeez.
Like, this whole show wouldn't even be a thing if Chase didn't do that. He really fucked up. And here, his dad is sick, so what does he do again? He betrays the team, even though the whole goal of the team is to serve justice to their parents.
Yeah, it's kind of like a weak motivation for the team as a whole if one of their members is like, I like my parents, I don't want to do this.
Right, exactly. Yeah. But I guess speaking of relationships, both in the show and in the comics, Chase was always initially attracted to Carolina. Mm-hmm. But both in the show and in the comics, Carolina is a lesbian who is attracted to Nico. Mm-hmm. So they kind of had to give Alex his own love interest in this season with the character of Livy.
Yeah.
And I found that to be actually one of the more compelling side stories of this season.
They were both good actors.
Yeah.
It was the most convincing relationship on the show. Like, even between the parents.
Right, exactly. All right, let's get into the last runaway, Molly Hernandez. She's the youngest of the group. In the comics, she's only about 11 or 12. But in this, she's a lot older, even though she only acts like she's 11 or 12.
Yeah, that was annoying.
Yeah, especially in the first season. She was a little bit better here. But in the first season, it was so apparent that you had like this 18-year-old acting like a 10-year-old. In this one, she acted a little bit more her age, but it was still not enough to not make her my least favorite character on this show.
I hated how every time she wanted to use her powers, she would like turn towards the camera and like wait 5 seconds, and then her eyes would light up. Then she would like smile for like another 5 seconds, and then she would use her powers.
It's pretty bad acting.
I think the acting all around wasn't that great.
I would agree with you. I think the best acted characters were Alex Wilder, Nico, and probably Chase Stein. I thought he did an okay job.
Yeah.
All right, let's move on to the parents. We'll go through this real quick. Jeffrey Wilder and Catherine Wilder, those are Alex's parents. Their villain archetype is like the criminal overlord, kind of like the Kingpin, but they're on the West Coast. So yeah, pretty ruthless. And I actually think I like these two characters the most out of all the parents groups because they actually, like their son, get a lot of shit done. Especially Catherine, who is probably the most sinister person in the Pride as portrayed in this series.
Yeah, for sure. She's also the one I like the least, but just because she's so sinister, I'm like, what are you doing? Don't do that.
But that's how it's supposed to be. That's how it was in the comics. You know, these are supposed to be supervillains. I think one of the mistakes that this show makes is that they try to humanize the parents too much. These aren't people that you're really supposed to sympathize with or empathize with in any way. They're comic book villain characters, you know? And while you might argue that, you know, this show makes them a lot more believable as human beings and a lot more interesting as characters, I would say that it actually detracts from the appeal of what made the comic book so great. And that, you know, you're supposed to really be rooting for these kids and be really frightened of their parents. And here, I'm not really frightened of the parents so much. I'm not really afraid of anybody.
That's true. I could totally see that. I wasn't afraid of the parents at all. I did sympathize with them on occasion, just being a father.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe if they were all much more like Catherine, much more ruthless, this would have been a better show. You're probably right.
I think probably the second most savage parent was Tina Minoru. So let's move on to Tina and Robert Minoru, who are the parents of Nico. In the comics, they were like the sorcerer villain archetype. They were like all-powerful magicians.
Right.
But in this, they're not that at all. They're like tech entrepreneurs. They fund a lot of the research that the other scientists in the Pride do and stuff like that. They're the head of a company called Wizard.
Right.
Which is the company that actually created the Staff of the One.
It seems to be sort of like Apple in this universe.
Yeah, exactly. And, the CEOs of Apple are a whole lot less compelling villains to me than, sorcerers.
Yeah.
Actually, Tina Minoru was actually in the Doctor Strange movie for a brief second, played by a different actress. But she was alongside Wong while they were preparing to fight Dormammu in that sanctum.
Oh, yeah.
You actually see her pull out the Staff of One and everything.
Really?
Yeah. So,
Okay, well, that confirms that this is not in the MCU.
I guess. I don't know. But I do like Tina as a character. I think she's actually pretty well done here. A little bit more interesting here than she is in the comics, in that she's just so effective and ruthless. Mm-hmm. A lot more ruthless than her husband, Robert, who in the first season had an affair with one of the other parents and everything. That was like a whole side story thing that was totally unnecessary. But did add an interesting dynamic to their relationship. It's kind of like a power struggle, where you kind of learn that despite the fact that Robert cheated, Tina still very much cares for him, even though she seems like a cold-hearted ice queen. It was fine. It was interesting.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Who's Amy?
Amy. Okay, so Amy is a character that was made up for this show. That is a great question.
What?
So it is Nico's sister, and she was the best friend of Alex, who was a hacker, and she actually hacked into Wizard's servers and found the footage of her parents performing the ritual. And she was going to go to the authorities with it, and Jonah found out and had her killed. And that was kind of like the catalyst for the group of Runaways, like kind of falling out of friendship with each other because they all felt so awkward about Nico's sister dying. And it was at the beginning of season 1 that they all kind of came back together for the first time in years.
Okay.
It was kind of like an unnecessary setup. I'm not entirely sure why they chose to give Nico a sister. I still can't figure out why they did it. It's still largely unnecessary, I think. It does add a little bit of drama to the proceedings, but not in a relevant way. Let's move on to the Deans, Leslie and Frank. These two are completely different. So damn different from the comics. In the comics, they're both actors, and they're like Hollywood stars who are aliens. But here, they're like the founders of like Scientology, or the heads of the Church of Scientology, except they don't call it Scientology. They call it the Church of Gibberum. Yeah, basically, which is just so bizarre. And Frank isn't even a member of the Pride in this show. He's like a Tom Cruise guy who's like really high up in this religion, but the Pride largely keeps him at arm's length because they don't think he's like evil or cunning enough to handle what they're planning.
Right.
And it's just such a weird alteration of the material. And I guess I understand why they did it, because they didn't want to go like the elder gods route with the Gibberum. Like in this show, there are no Gibberum gods.
They're aliens. They're
right.
aliens.
Here, it's Jonah. He is like the Gibberum. He's the one who promised them like all this power and influence in exchange for their help in him digging his alien family out of the ground.
Right. Is Jonah a character from the comics?
No.
Oh, what the hell?
He's completely brand new to this.
Yeah. I never got the sense once that Frank was like a Tom Cruise character. Like they mentioned he was an actor, but it seems like none of these characters...
That was more in season 1.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, with Frank.
But like it never seemed like these parents were like the most powerful people on the planet at any point in the show.
Certainly most powerful people in Los Angeles. In Southern California.
Well, even that.
Yeah. So what they did is they took Carolina's character, she's an alien, and they tried to play off of that by saying, oh, her father is, the main bad guy, the Gibberum guy from the comics. And
why?
Yeah, like I said, unnecessary. But I guess they were trying to make it more realistic. I would have rather seen these giant elder gods, because the way they're drawn in the comics, it looks pretty cool. They're like giants. They're like massive. It's pretty interesting. Moving on to the Yorks, Dale and Stacy. In the comics, they were like the time-traveling villains, kind of like King the Conqueror of that group. Here, there's no time travel. They're just scientists, basically. They were able to genetically engineer their Deinonychus for Gert, but it's a feat that seems kind of largely removed from the rest of this universe. I think a lot of the show would be pretty down to earth if all of a sudden you didn't occasionally see a dinosaur running through it, and it just kind of adds to the weirdness.
Yeah.
It feels a little bit out of place here.
Wait, so in the comic, it's an actual raptor from the past?
In the comics, Old Lace is a dinosaur that they took from the past, brought to the future, where they had like advanced like genetic therapy techniques to make the dinosaur programmable to their DNA. So they got the dinosaur from the past, brought it to the future, altered it, and then brought it to the present. And that was actually pretty cool.
That is so cool. Why? This show sucks so much. Gosh.
But in the show, they're pretty funny, and I like the actors that are playing them, Kevin Wiseman and Bridget Branagh.
True. Yeah, they are great actors.
They have a good chemistry together, I think.
Yeah.
And they're pretty quick-witted and have good comedic timing. So,
But in the comics, did the Yorks also adopt Molly?
no. In the comics, Molly's parents are alive. They're not the Hernandezes. They're called the Hayes. Her name is Molly Hayes in the comics. And in the comics, they were telepathic mutants. That was their archetype. But in this show, they were a couple of geologists who discovered Jonah's plan and were killed for it by another member of the Pride, Leslie, actually. Which is, again, far less interesting than having telepathic mutants on your show. And in the comics, that's what Molly is. She's a mutant. She didn't get her powers from, like, these weird alien rocks.
Yeah.
She's a mutant.
Oh my gosh. Why? Why?
I know.
They didn't want to hire like another couple?
I don't know.
That's so weird.
It does make you mad, huh?
Yeah.
Let's move on to the Steins. Now, actually, Victor and Janet Stein are pretty faithful to the source material here. Them and the Wilders are probably the most similar, in that Victor and Janet are the mad scientists of the Pride group from the comics. And here, they're the mad scientists as well.
Yeah.
They're just extremely smart people. Like, Victor Stein rivals the intelligence of Tony Stark, although they never mentioned that, even though they live pretty damn close to each other.
Tony Stark lives in Los Angeles?
In the MCU, Tony Stark lives on the West Coast. Yeah, I think he lived near Malibu, I think, on the coast.
Oh, you're right.
So it's weird that they never ever like compare Victor to him, never make any kind of Stark mention or anything like that. But I do like James Marsters as Victor Stein. He had a much bigger role in the first season than he did in the second. He was an abusive father to Chase and would beat him up if he got anything less than an A. Even though in the comics, Chase was a pure jock who got straight C's and would get beat up for that. They didn't want to have like a pure jock on the show to make him more interesting, I guess. I don't know. To make him less stereotypical, maybe. The comics are very much the Breakfast Club. It's like the Breakfast Club meets Marvel. This show was not that.
Yeah, the show was not that.
No.
Right.
And I mean, I guess stereotypes are a little bit cliche, and I guess Chase here is more interesting than he is in the comics, but it ruins the kind of character dynamic that you have amongst the whole group.
Well, I don't even like to think of it as like cliches. They're archetypes, right? You're talking about the villains as being archetypes. Those are teenage archetypes, you know?
Yeah, I guess so. You need like an athletic jock kind of dude in the group, I think. I think that would be more interesting.
Yeah, why not?
Because Chase and Alex are actually kind of similar in the show. They're both like tech geniuses, you know?
Right.
Yeah. The last character I want to talk about is Julian McMahon as Jonah. This character is almost exactly like Victor Von Doom, even from season 1.
Right.
Although I will say he is much better here than he was in Fantastic Four. Because in the Fantastic Four films, that character, Victor Von Doom, was nothing like he was from the comics. Here, he's actually, acceptable as this new character that they made up for the show. I believe him as who he is. I never believed him as Dr. Doom.
Yeah, I definitely found his character interesting. I think Julian McMahon is just a good actor.
Yeah.
And he was definitely more interesting than any of the parents and progressing like the plot forward and just being a villain.
Yeah, he was definitely the most villainous. He's trying to convert Carolina. He was actually going to destroy most of Los Angeles with the departure of his spaceship and everything like that. So that was cool. But what I think I found most compelling about his character is his approach at getting back his family was amassing this wealth and influence through the creation of a religion, like kind of duping these primitive human beings into thinking that he was like a god kind of, and then using that influence to, create more influence. And then therefore, when the technology caught up, finally release his family.
You could dig a giant hole.
Yeah. It's like something that you haven't actually seen before in any other like alien invasion story. Like you never see like a sole alien achieve his goals through those means.
Yeah. One thing I didn't get is if he just needed to dig a hole, what took him so long to raise his ship out of the ground? There was no reason to wait that long.
That's a good question. I think he needed some kind of like special drill or something to dig that deep without breaking the spaceship, I think.
But hadn't they already done that like by the beginning of the season?
Yes, they had. They had already reached down. They reached down at the end of last season. And actually the standoff happened at the drill site between the kids and their parents. And at the end of season 1, you were expecting like this big, huge fight between the kids and parents because they even lined up like it, like the Civil War movie, kind of like when they lined up at the airport. They lined up like that. And literally, Carolina blasted a bolt of energy and Jonah countered it, and that was the end of the fight. Like, they did nothing. Like, Old Lace didn't bite anybody. Nothing happened.
So, like, the big, like, climactic battle in episode 7 took place in the exact same location as the big climactic battle of season 1?
It felt largely the same, although I did like episode 7's action a whole lot more, because we did get a few, like, superhero-y moments, specifically with Nico, I think.
Yeah.
And the visual effects on the ship, I think, were actually pretty cool.
Yeah.
But let's get into the story highlights real quick. So episode 1 was called Give Me Shelter. In this one, the kids are on the run. We have Graciela's death and funeral. They found the hostel, which is from the comics. In the comics, the hostel was like this mansion this rich guy built in the Hollywood Hills that fell into the ground due to an earthquake. So it was all torn and largely underground. You had to go through a cave to get to it. But here, they had doors. So
that was really weird.
You would think that more people would be able to find this abandoned mansion.
I'm actually surprised that was from the comics, because to me this felt like it was just a way to make the show cheaper. Like, if you want a cheap show, you only have like a certain number of locations.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's interesting that it was from the comic.
Yeah, in the comics it looked a lot more run down. It was more just like a hideout. It didn't feel quite as homey, I guess I would say. Like, they didn't fix it up quite as nice as they did here. At the end of this episode, Carolina is meeting Jonah, and there's the big earthquake, and it kind of sets up what you think are going to be the stakes for the show.
Right.
It's like preventing Los Angeles from crumbling to the ground. Episode 2 was called Radio On. In that, Nico, Carolina, and Molly, they fight against Tina, which I thought was a pretty good action beat, because Tina is just wiping the floor with all three of them. Although Nico is like especially aggressive toward this person who could totally just destroy her with a thought.
Right.
Like, I guess she was just trusting enough that her mother wouldn't kill her. But then, like, if you have that much faith in a person, why would you try to be quite so violent towards them, I guess? I don't know. Does that make sense?
Yeah, but I guess I was more concerned with the fact that the mother gave up the staff of one to begin with.
Why would she do that? That doesn't make any sense. She's done that several times during the course of the show. It makes no sense, because if she's trying to, achieve her goals and prevent these kids from running away, why would you give up your greatest weapon? It's a super powerful weapon.
Right. And they kind of mentioned, like, oh, I want them to be able to protect themselves out on the street and stuff like that. But it still kind of seems dumb.
Yeah. It's like, a good way to get your kids home is make it so they can't protect themselves out on the street and like are forced to come back home
for
safety.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's dumb. Especially what happened right after that fight when like all of a sudden Nico had like this weird mood swing where she's like angry at Carolina for no other reason than to just create drama on the show. Like It didn't make sense. A lot of the emotions I think that the characters experience throughout the course of the show are largely random.
Yeah.
It's like you're feeling this way at one moment and then all of a sudden you feel like a completely different way. And I don't know how to rationalize it except for the fact that you're a teenager. It's how I feel when I watch the show sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. It did feel like it was just there for conflict, but like unnecessary conflict.
Yeah.
Like there were so many things in the show, so many like subplots and mood swings.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, you could have not done that. You're right. Just make this a movie. This could have been done in like 2 hours.
Right. In this episode, Chase and Gert get power to the hostel, and we finally see Molly like do her vigilante thing by sneaking out at night and beating up, I guess it was a pimp or something.
Yeah, it wasn't clear.
She flipped his car. Actually, she didn't really beat him up, did she?
That was the second time she approached him, when she flipped his car.
Right. Okay. Yeah. In episode 3, which is called Double Zeros, the Runaways try to train in their powers. They train against each other, and Nico learns that she can only do a spell once during their rescue of Alex on the airport tarmac, as Jeffrey's trying to take Alex away from Darius. It was in this episode that Darius was killed by Catherine, which I thought was pretty cold-blooded.
Yeah, that was very cold-blooded.
I did like Darius as a character. He was a really sympathetic character, even from season 1, in that like he grew up friends with Jeffrey, and they both went to prison together because they were in a gang, and then all of a sudden, Jeffrey falls in love with his lawyer, who was Catherine, and they get propositioned by Jonah to buy up this property. But Jeffrey can't do that until he gets out of jail, so he asks Darius to take the rap for him and plead guilty to the crime that Jeffrey was charged with.
Right.
So he spent like 10 years in prison. And then when he came out, Jeffrey totally just brushed him under the rug and didn't give him his due. So Darius has always been a sympathetic character, and it was probably the most shocking moment of the entire season for me when he died. I didn't want to see him die.
I should have known that he was going to die, because he said he was going to have a son. So right away, you should have known.
The end of this episode is when Molly goes back to beat up the pimp, flip his car, and then she's followed back to the hostel by Topher. So we meet Topher, who is a character from the comics. But in the comics, Topher is a vampire.
What?
Yeah, he's a vampire who joins the team, but who secretly wants to feed on the team. He's not a teenager. He's like hundreds of years old. And so he tries to feast on the team. And so they're like running from him while they're also running, trying to stay away from their parents. So it just added this extra like level of conflict and everything like that. And in the end, he ends up dying because he bites into Carolina's neck, but her powers are solar based. She has like solar blood.
Right.
So it was like, it just made him explode. It was kind of cool. But here, I don't know what the fuck this was.
It was pointless. That whole character was pointless.
Yeah. In episode 4, which is called Old School, he helps them steal a computer from the school. And that's pretty much all that happened in that episode.
And nobody questioned him.
Yeah, exactly. The guy kind of stands out in a crowd. You would think people would be able to recognize, hey, you don't go to this school. What are you doing with that computer?
Right.
It's kind of silly. In episode 5, which is called Rock Bottom, Carolina meets her alien family at the bottom of the dig site. And this is a pretty cool episode for Robert Minoru because he actually gets like a big action scene where he attacks Jonah and is nearly successful.
Yeah.
If he wasn't hit in the back of the head by those women at the church. At the end of this episode is when Topher dies. Or does he die? I don't know if he's just really injured.
We don't know because we don't go back to him, which means it was completely pointless.
It was completely pointless. But yeah, he gets like a dumpster dropped on him by, what was it, Chase?
Yeah.
Yeah, with the fistigons, right?
Yeah.
It was so dumb. Like he throws it at him, wanting to kill him. And so Chase blasts it back and is falling back toward Gert, who's about to die.
I'm like, that's what you get for standing in the car, Gert. This is what happens.
Yeah, exactly. But like, why did he try to rescue her when moments before he was trying to kill her teammates?
Who the fuck knows?
It was just like this switch, this like emotional switch that just happens all the time in the show.
Because he wasn't really a bad guy, dude.
But in the comics, he was a bad guy. He died. He was killed because he tried to kill the team. Episode 6 was called Bury Another. In that episode, not much happens. Jonah kidnaps Jeffrey in an attempt to try to heal his peeling skin.
That was gross.
He's trying to get some energy from Jeffrey in the way that they would a sacrifice.
Right.
But they didn't use a sacrifice in the show. Like, it
No.
would have been so much more compelling if Frank had to get him a sacrifice. But, he just chose not to. But transferring the energy from Jeffrey to Jonah didn't kill Jeffrey.
Exactly.
Why?
Exactly.
Like, it didn't really hurt any of them. If this was all that Jonah needed to survive, why didn't he just do this regularly? Like, get these volunteers from the Pride to give up some of their energy and then, be fine afterward, apparently.
Exactly. Big plot hole.
That's
there.
probably the biggest plot hole in the entire series. In the end, Jeffrey is rescued by the kids who learn that there's going to be a sacrifice. So they go there, find out it's Jeffrey, and they rescue him, take him back, tie him up, and we're on to episode 7, which is called Last Rites. In this one, there was a big rescue mission to save Carolina's family at the bottom of the hole, and Jeffrey joins them in that mission.
Right. And this was like a big day for the church because it was like some kind of ascension or something like that.
Right. They were going to see the ascension of the ship. And somehow Alex was able to hack the vans into becoming self-driving vehicles or something.
Yeah, that was weird.
I don't understand that. But this was probably the best episode of the season because it had that fight against Jonah at the end. And, Nico actually got some cool superhero moments where she's like flying out of the hole. And it was a tense moment because you thought she was going to die down there.
Right.
And she strikes her superhero pose and everything like that. I mean, it was cool. It felt like a very comic book moment, but it also felt largely removed from the other characters on the Runaways team who don't feel like superheroes at all.
Yeah.
But she also had the other cool moment where she stabbed Jonah in the back with her staff.
Yeah, that wasn't fair. Like, the Fistigons barely do anything. The Velociraptor doesn't get to do anything. She gets 2 cool moments in, like, the span of 5 minutes.
Yeah, she's kind of like the series favorite, huh?
Yeah.
At the end of the episode, the ship is destroyed, Jonah dies, and, the series could have ended right there.
Series over.
And it would have been perfect, but we get this, like, cryptic message from Jonah, who turns out to be this Australian dude, and I guess the energy leaves his body and inhabits somebody else, along with some other energy aliens that have escaped the ship when it exploded as well.
We don't even learn that right away.
No.
Like, I sort of feel like they should have let you know that happened right away. Because after that, I was like, why is this TV show still going on? Because they didn't, like, address the fact that Jonah's still alive soon enough.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. I started episode 8. I'm like, what the fuck? What is happening? You're done. Or why is this still a show?
Right.
But in episode 8, which is called Past Life, we learn of Jonah's past. We learn the origin of the Church of the Gibberum, where he meets Leslie's father.
Yeah.
And everything like that, which I thought was pretty interesting. Because you see him like in the 30s, and then you see him in the 70s. I thought that was pretty well done. And had probably the most interesting cinematography out of the series here.
It was an interesting mythology that they were setting up.
Yeah. The kids sneak into the hotel to clear Darius's name. So that's kind of like the plot we're on now, that Jonah is supposedly dead. They're trying to clear Darius's name. And that episode ends when they get caught and they're on the run, trying to run out of the hotel. And Molly kind of sacrifices herself, knowing that she's the strongest of the group and can get out of whatever situation she gets herself in.
That was dumb.
It was dumb.
Like, why did she even do that? Why even get caught? She didn't need to do that.
Well, she was buying the rest of the team time, basically.
She didn't even need to, because they were getting through that door.
That's true. Yeah, she did like remove the pipe that she had put in front of the door.
Exactly.
Who knows? In episode 9, it was called Big Shot. The parents decide to create weapons to use against their children to bring them back home. Some parents are acting a little weird, specifically Victor Stein, Tina Minoru, and Stacey Yorks. And we don't learn why until later on, because they're possessed by aliens, basically.
What really bothered me about this moment was, I think this is the episode where the dinosaur gets sprayed.
Uh-huh.
But we don't see Stacy, Gert's mom, like working on anything until after the dinosaur's already been sprayed.
Right.
So like that came out of nowhere. It's
did.
like there was no setup for anything like that.
Yeah.
It was weird.
You know what's a weird point is that if it's so easy for the energy aliens to like transfer into bodies, you know, just through the air, why does Jonah keep needing sacrifices to sustain this body when he can pretty much go into any body he wants to, just when this one dies?
Well, no, they addressed that in the show.
Uh-huh.
He didn't want to take on a new form.
But why?
And because of Carolina. He wanted Carolina to be comfortable with him, and he didn't want to keep swapping forms.
Oh. That's stupid.
It is.
She barely knows him anyway.
Exactly.
I can see if she was like raised by him or something like that.
Exactly.
But she met him for the very first time in season 1. They've known each other literally days.
That makes no sense then. I got that impression, and I was like, that makes no sense.
No. Oh my god. Okay. At the end of episode 9, AWOL kills Flores and kidnaps Livy as a means to use her in the next episode to find the Runaways hostile. So that's what happens in episode 10, which is actually probably my second favorite episode, because I really like the hostage situation that they created here, and Alex had to use his strategic thinking. Yeah. And he admits that most of his strategies come from playing video games and stuff like that, which is straight from the comics. I actually smiled at that. But it was just a great scene. I think his plan was pretty damn good to get a hostage of their own by luring AWOL into the hostel and then,
sealing off the building.
Yeah, sealing off the building and things like that. It ended kind of strangely. It looks like the staff of the One is taking over Nico with like dark magic or something.
Yeah.
It was a pretty cool moment. It was like an iconic moment, I thought, that they definitely used in the trailers for this.
Yeah. So did she kill them?
Yeah, she killed them. Which is one of the reasons why in one of the later episodes she decided to hide the staff, because she was kind of afraid of it.
Yeah, for like 5 minutes.
Yeah, exactly.
So dumb.
Always switching their emotions.
We weren't like that as teenagers, right?
I hope not. God.
I don't think we were.
I hope not. I don't think any of the teenagers I know are like that either. It's kind of weird how the characters are written here. At the end of episode 10, Leslie is taken by Frank to go to reconditioning since she's wanting to shut the church down, and he wants to stay the head of the church.
Right.
Episode 11 was called Last Waltz. Chase and Gert were kidnapped by the Yorkses, and they are rescued by the Runaways in this episode. So they go back, and Molly has a quinceanera, and Chase leaves to be with his dying father.
Oh, gosh.
That's pretty much what happened in that episode. Episode 12 was called Earth Angel. In that episode, Molly and Nico and Carolina go rescue Leslie from the crater where she's being reconditioned in that bizarre cult compound. Chase is convinced to join the Pride, which is largely still in keeping with the stupid decisions of the character. At the end of this episode, it was so fucking bizarre. A weird moment where Carolina is approached by Zavin, who is her betrothed alien, which was such a weird way to introduce the character. Although Zavin is in the comics. Zavin was like a Super Skrull in training, and he fell in love with Carolina. I just didn't like, maybe I didn't like the actress that portrayed Zavin.
Yeah.
It was a little off.
It wasn't like an interesting alien in any way.
It was like a boring, lame alien.
Exactly, exactly.
Last episode was called Split Up, episode 13. In this one, Chase meets up with the rest of the Runaways and, warns them that there's going to be an attack unless they form the new Pride. The Runaways decline and the parents attack with their new weapons. Nico fights her parents in one of the weirdest kung fu fights I've ever seen in my life.
Yeah, it was really weird. It was like, oh, Asian family, they all know karate.
Yeah, and like they're like backhanding their daughter and stuff like that. I'm like, dang. Like, I know you guys are evil, but that's hardcore.
Right? And they're taking turns, right? I was like, oh my
like
gosh.
taking turns like pimp slapping their daughters. So
exactly. I didn't know whether to laugh or like cry.
it was so uncomfortable because not only do you think of the Asian stereotype where they all know like kung fu or something, but you also have this, child abuse moment. It was so awkward. But it did end kind of in an interesting way where we see that Robert might be dying from the glass in his neck.
I mean, not really. Like Tina's in the next scene, like not with Robert. What happened to Robert?
Oh, yeah, I didn't even think about that. He's probably fine. I mean, they're going to be fine, including Jeffrey and Catherine, who were caught by the police having weapons in their vehicle.
Yeah.
So that was pretty clever of Alex. For a second there, I thought he was going to shoot his parents.
But his fingerprints were on the gun.
He wiped them clean. But he didn't get his parents' fingerprints on the gun. He just put this gun that had been implicated in several, I guess, crimes into their vehicle.
Okay.
But again, it's all circumstantial because their prints aren't on the gun.
Right.
So, I mean, Catherine's a good enough lawyer to be able to get them out of this.
Yeah.
For sure. Right after that, we learned that Victor is actually possessed by Jonah. And he captures Carolina using the same technology that was used against Jonah by Robert and kidnaps her, basically. I thought that James Marsters, the guy who plays Victor, did a pretty, actually damn good job of channeling Julian McMahon's character.
They look similar, the actors.
They do look a little bit similar. Yeah, which I think added to the believability of that whole thing.
Yeah.
There was a cool little moment that I think is worth shouting out here where we see Chase drawing schematics for the leapfrog on his iPad or something, I guess.
Yeah, I didn't understand that reference.
So in the comics, it was his father that created the leapfrog, and the Runaways just kind of commandeered it while they were down in the Gibram's base.
Uh-huh.
So here you have like Chase inventing all this shit that's really his father's, and it's kind of just out of character, I guess. Although I guess, Chase does become smarter later on in the comics. He starts, like studying and stuff.
But it's an arc.
Right, exactly. It's an arc. He grows into that character. I don't know. It would be really cool if it makes it into season 3. At the end of this episode, Dale kidnaps Gert. And what happens to Molly at the end of this? Oh, she and Nico both make it back to the hostel where they learn from Zavin exactly what's going on regarding the parents.
Yeah.
And so that's the whole big cliffhanger that this season ends on, even though it seemed more like an episode cliffhanger.
Exactly.
Like, it wasn't like a big, huge ending.
It reminded me sort of like the way the Titans ended, is that it was just like, there's another episode, right? Oh, there isn't?
Yeah.
What?
Yeah, this was not even your biggest episode. That was episode 7.
Exactly.
Yeah.
What I didn't get at the end is, Jonah in his new Victor form is explaining to, I guess, like his daughter and his wife or something like that, how they could use the captured humans to, like, stay young, I guess.
Yeah, they're going to use Chase and Carolina and Jenna as sacrifices through those pods that transfer the energy into them.
Right, but how could you use Carolina as a sacrifice when she's an alien?
I think they were just holding Carolina in stasis, knowing that she was kind of like a problem child.
Well, that's not what he said.
You're right. Yeah, that's another hole, I guess, at the end of this one. Probably one that they'll just kind of like brush over in the next season, if there is a next season, which I think there will be. Because a lot of people actually seem to enjoy the show. And I think the reason that we're coming down so hard on it is primarily because I am familiar with the source material, and we are, again, outside of the demographic.
I think it was the same way I reviewed Justice League Throne of Atlantis, because I had read that comic storyline, and it was a really good comic storyline, but it was so different, and they made so many dumb choices that there was no way that I was going to walk away from that movie, like, liking it.
Right.
So I could kind of relate with you when it comes to this show.
Yeah. And like, if you look at Rotten Tomatoes at their scores for this show, like, a lot of critics seem to like it. And, some people that I know have watched this show not knowing anything about, the source material, not even knowing it was a Marvel comic until, the opening logo. And they told me that they actually enjoy it. So
Not me.
I think it does have an appeal that I recognize in its freshness. It's definitely a very modern, almost cutting edge sort of coming of age story that incorporates some superheroic elements. Again, I think if you are a fan of Marvel and you are a fan of teenage dramas, this will be right up your alley. But if you haven't seen Cloak and Dagger yet, I would much highly recommend that show over this one because it is way better. Cloak and Dagger is actually really damn good. I would recommend that show to anybody. Whether you're a fan of teenage drama or not.
Not watching it.
So, I mean, if you like the show, all the power to you. Like the purpose of our reviews, and I think reviews in general should never be to sway others' opinions, but rather to like help solidify one's own opinion, positive or negative, through comparison, if you have seen the show. Like some of the things we say you'll agree with, which will reinforce that idea that you have, and some of the things that we say you'll disagree with, for the same effect. In the end, There is no right or wrong with this, just ideas, and it's our job to stay as objective as possible. And again, objectively, Cloak and Dagger is just a better version of this show. To that end, I give The Runaways 2.5 stars.
Dang. I think prior to this review, I would have thought that was harsh.
Yeah.
But after you explained all the differences from the comics and how much better the comic was, there's no way I could really justify giving it anything higher than a 3 stars because they have the source material.
Right.
And it's perfectly good source material.
Exactly.
So why not use it? Why change it?
Yeah, you get it. Exactly.
Yeah. So
we are tainted by knowledge.
Such a burden.
It's a curse. All this knowledge. But yeah, 2.5 stars. I would actually give Cloak and Dagger about 3.5 stars, which is pretty good. I do think that Cloak and Dagger has steps to go before it's like really damn magnificent as like say the Netflix shows or something like that.
Yeah.
But for what it is, I still highly recommend Cloak and Dagger way more over The Runaways. But that does it for this review. Go ahead and let us know what you guys thought of The Runaways if you have seen it, all 12 of you, and reach out to us on social media. And you can find us by visiting dynamicduel.com and clicking on the Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter links we have there.
Yeah, and at dynamicduel.com, you'll also find a link to our merchandise store where we sell, various t-shirts and mugs and other things with artwork from our No Prizes.
Yeah, they're really cool. Definitely check those out, especially Jonathan's Vitruvian Man design that has like a bunch of DC and Marvel characters like fused together in that classic Leonardo da Vinci drawing.
And we also have the commemorative episode 100 t-shirt of the Justice League fighting the Avengers still up.
Yeah.
I'm not sure how much longer we'll keep that up. Might be a limited time offer
forever.
thing.
Why not?
Fine. All right.
Oh, create demand by reducing supply.
Exactly. Right.
Interesting. Okay.
Economics.
So that does it for this episode. In our next episode, we're going to get back to the duels because it's been a long ass time since we've done a duel episode.
Yeah, in essence, Detective Champ and Howard the Duck.
Yeah, over a month, I think, because we've done a lot of review episodes back to back to back. So yeah, looking forward to pitting Superboy versus Rogue. That's going to be an awesome episode. Both characters have like these cool tactile powers.
And these cool leather jackets that they wore in the 90s.
Yeah, hell yeah.
And it's all leading up to the Reign of the Superman animated DC film review.
Right, which we'll be reviewing the following week after Superboy versus Rogue. If you guys haven't seen the Death of Superman animated film, go ahead and check that out. I think we reviewed that like last July, I think. It's a pretty damn good movie, and it's the first part of a 2-parter, which culminates with the Reign of the Superman film that comes out in a couple weeks. Look forward to that this month. That episode will be followed by the Punisher Season 2 review, so lots to look forward to January.
Yeah, and please don't forget to rate, review, share, and subscribe our podcast with all of your friends and family.
Yep.
Specifically, again, on iTunes. We could use all the ratings that we could get. If you could help us out, that would be phenomenal.
It would be amazing.
I only got super.
All right. How late is it now? You can tell we've been going on too long. All right. We'll talk to you guys next week.
Up, and away.
True believers.